mentally or physically, success can be defined as getting up one more time after you've been knocked down over and over and over again. My name is T. Wood, and this is Triumphant Moments, where I highlight significant moments in life that are far beyond the surface to encourage, inform, and inspire people to triumph over their life's challenges. With me today, I have Mr. Alphonso Gibbs Jr., who holds a master's degree in industrial technology and social work. He's a licensed clinical social worker, currently employed by the Veterans Administration Health Systems of Southern Nevada in mental health. His significant case management skills, experience with several mentally ill, dually diagnosed, formerly homeless adult men and women, adolescent youth, at-risk youth, and families. Mr. Alphonso Gibbs Jr. is experienced in the health disparity area of end-of-life care, hospice, as well as a trained end-of-life care for veterans. He launched a national initiative on men's health issues at the National Association of Social Workers. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alphonso Gibbs Jr. Really appreciate you coming here on the show and be able to provide some things for the listeners, some knowledge, and just be able to help others out in their own daily lives. Thank you.
My pleasure. More than happy to.
All right. So look, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. Just for starters here, you're a licensed clinical social worker. How many years of experience do you have in just being a licensed clinical social worker?
Oh, gosh. I've been a social worker since between social work and public health. I've been out there since 98.
Well, I tell you what, this is not to date anything, but I definitely was in high school around that time. So I was still trying to understand the birds and the bees and things of that sort. So basically what this says is that you have a wealth of knowledge.
I've been through some things. I've seen some things. I've also escaped some things.
Wow. Safe to say. What motivated you to get into social work, the mental health field particularly?
Well, what put me in social work, because I also have a master's degree in industrial technology. So wow. I was doing the hard science stuff first, working for corporations like General Motors, McDonnell Douglas, Fisher Body, and the like, Polaroid, and all those types of things. But I went through a bad marriage and a divorce and a separation from my newborn child, my son. And at that point, I became extremely distressed and depressed and distraught. And living in LA, and my church family, the men's group, formed kind of a support for me. And they really buffered me and helped me through the pain. And I realized that I had witnessed something that not a lot of men get when they're going through something like that. And I realized that I was very fortunate to get what I got. And so I was encouraged to look at social work. And because I was in LA, I was directed to the University of Southern California School of Social Work.
One time.
And I went to the University of Southern California School of Social Work, and went through their program. And my focus was on African American men and boys because A, that's something I know something about, and B, as I said before, once I went through that pain, I realized that I wanted to help other men and boys who were struggling with life's issues that don't always get the kind of support and help that I got.
Many times we see people go through things, and sometimes that puts us such a low space that we really don't have the motivation to try to help someone else once we get to a center position in our lives. So what was placed in you to make you want to actually help someone else? Because you don't have to do this. You didn't have to get to a point in your life to where you help someone else. You could have just took the help you got and just moved on.
Because I realized that there was a void. I realized that, as I said before, what I got was not something that the average man would get. And as I've told people many times, as far as I'm concerned, I don't consider myself that special in the sense that what I got, I felt that I was most deserving of. No, I was fortunate, but at the same time, I was also cognizant of the fact that when I looked around, I saw my peers, colleagues, friends, and associates who might have found themselves in the same situation, who were turning to alternatives or the usual, getting the usual outcomes, whether it be drug abuse, substance, alcohol, sex, gambling, risk taking, poor relationships, poor choices, job insecurity, you name it. I didn't want that for myself. But at the same time, I also knew that too often we don't tell our stories, we act them out. And because the world isn't prepared for the behavior, they want to stomp that out. I felt that there was a need to help those individuals find the language and the coping skills to work their way through those issues and get on the other side of it. Because I also feel that once another person has been taught, so to speak, how to fish, he too can become a teacher of men to help them learn how to fish or, in some cases, carry their heavy loads.
So there is a difference in acting out versus telling your story. If we don't have an opportunity to express or talk about what we've been through or what we are experiencing and have ways to cope, that acting out that you were speaking about earlier, to me, that's where the danger comes.
No, I think, first of all, you would know this all too well, given that you're in the field, and that is that hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely.
And so it's not so much that I want you to hurt, but I want you to feel what I felt. Because if you can't understand me, then we can't relate. There's no way that we can communicate with one another. So because I can't, or I'm not allowed, or I haven't found the means by which to express what it is that I'm experiencing, then the best thing I can do is to act it out. And I'm in acting it out, I'm going to demonstrate to you what it is that I went through and what it is that I want you to understand that I'm dealing with. Because obviously, you're not intuitive enough to just discern what that is. And I'm not expressive enough or articulate enough or emotionally intelligent enough to be able to explain it.
When you state that particular part, does that make it fair for someone to go that avenue of more acting it out just because they feel that the person may not be able to relate or understand how they feel? Is that fair? They're expressing themselves, but does that make it fair?
Well, I don't know that you can just place fairness on feelings.
Exactly.
Because a person's feelings are valid.
Absolutely.
the unfortunate reality is when those feelings are not validated, then it becomes more of a disconnect.
Absolutely.
So I'm not saying that a person's right for their inappropriate behavior. Not at all. I'm not excusing inappropriate behavior, and it's not about. It's about being understood.
Okay. That is very important for my listeners to understand this, in being the importance of being validated. And see, many times, both of us are in the mental health field, many times that we have, let's say you have a client come in, they come in expressing frustration, anger. Sometimes they're projecting their feelings and their thoughts out towards you. You're sitting in front of them, listening. So sometimes you become the target of them. Instead of accepting it themselves, they're pushing it off on you. Many people get confused, that initial feeling of anger, frustration, and take it into themselves as though they're the target, when in reality we need to look beyond those emotions that they're expressing at that moment and be able to understand that it's just a frustration or a feeling that they may be going through.
As I was saying earlier, you're not necessarily excusing, you're not necessarily agreeing, you're not necessarily accepting. All you're doing is acknowledging. I hear what you're saying. That must have been painful. I can understand that when that happened, it made you feel that way. Now, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that I agree. I'm saying I'm hearing you. I'm listening to you. And I want you to know that you're being heard.
Wow. When I say men's health, what are the first two things that come to mind?
The first two things that come to mind are mental health, obviously, and prostate health, prostate care, prostate recognition, screening, testing, treatment, all those things.
Can you please elaborate on the topic of prostate care? When's?
Sure. I'll give you a situation. I can give you an example. Years ago, I was in my hometown of Saginaw, Michigan, and I was the deputy health officer for the county public health department. And I went to my doctor. I was over 40 and learned that my prostate screening, which was routine, was not covered by the county insurance policy at that time. And so I went to the human resources officer and asked, and then went to the benefits person and asked about why that was such. And I learned that the county did not cover prostate screenings until the age of 50. Well, upon further research, I learned that they were going off of old American Cancer Society data, very old data. And I brought forward the current information, which said that the screenings needed to be done at 40, particularly for African American males. And then I had to then go and go before the county commissioners to get them to change the policy, the rider, because in my appeal to them, I told them, I said, well, you've got over 50% of your county sheriffs are African American males. If you wait until they're 50 to screen them, if they do have any prostate cancer issues, you're too far down the rabbit hole and you're going to pay more for treatment than you would for testing. So they changed the rider. But the point remains that in many cases, entities are not on top of it. And then at the same time, I also know, having been a man for quite some time in this journey, that if you don't make it possible, I'm not going to push for it.
There you go.
Especially for something like that. If you're not going to make prostate cancer screening possible and accessible to me, that's not something that the average man is going to raise his hand and say, "Hey, I want this." No, we've got to be pushed, pulled, prodded, and directed. Now, to go even farther with that experience, one of the things I did with the American Cancer Society was to put together a prostate cancer screening project where we screened men for 2 days.
Wow.
And we screened over 300 men in 2 days.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Some had never been screened.
Was there a conversation that took part in, a part of the screening? Was there a mental health aspect of it, or was it just more of a basic interview?
It was mainly focused on just that. And where I lived at that time, there were a lot of retirees. There were some men that had been unemployed. There were some men that were underemployed. There were men that just weren't considering focusing on that screening. And one gentleman in particular, his prostate was so swollen, enlarged, I should say, that the doctor brought him into his office and treated him pro bono.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like, based off your own experience, that's what prompted you to ignite doing that check with those 300 gentlemen. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. My own experience with the fact that the county was not covering that screening. Therefore, if it's not being covered, it's not going to be asked for. If it's not made possible, they're not going for it.
What are the numbers? What is the time that we should start, getting those checks? I'm a 41-year-old man. What time should we start getting those checks? Is it 40? Is it 50? Is it 45?
A year ago for you.
A year ago, so 40. Okay. And from your perspective, has the technique of the check, do you think that has evolved or changed over time?
No. No, you have two choices. You have the prostate screening antigen exam, where they take a sample of your blood and they screen for the antigen, and the digital rectal exam, the DRE. And those are it. That's it. The human body hasn't morphed into something else. So there are only certain ways that we have of checking, particularly for that walnut-sized gland.
From your perspective, is there any connection between mental health and prostate health?
Well, yes, in many ways. There are some situations where I can say firsthand. I mean, I just received a call last week from a dear friend of mine, one of my former college roommates, actually, one of my homeboys, who called me to tell me that he has been found with prostate cancer. And he is very upbeat. He was very positive. He was very encouraged that the tests were able to detect where and how much and the like. And so he's in the process of trying to determine how he wants to approach it. But one of the things he's not doing is sticking his head in the sand. He's not depressed. He's not despondent. He's not writing things off as a death sentence. He's very, very encouraged with the various resources that he has at hand, whether it be his doctor, the medical system that he's affiliated with, the various support groups. He has a support group through his church. He's also connected with a university men's support group, a research group actually, and I also connected him with an organization that I'm familiar with and an advisory board member of, and which is called it's Men's Health Network. Men's Health Network has been doing men's health related presentations, data collection, workshops, you name it, for over 20 years. And so I connected him with their website to look at the various types of research and data that's been collected on that subject alone. And I personally have written several articles to them that they've published in multiple languages around men in depression, holiday depression, and the like. So, yes, there is a connection to men's health and mental health and prostate health and mental health, because, again, a lot of any type of recovery or methodology for handling an illness or an accident or anything is, how do you maintain your mental health? How do you keep your spirits uplifted? How do you handle trauma, drama, stress, life?
When I hear you say that towards the end, the first thing that rings off in my mind is quality of life. Can that be plugged into that?
Indeed.
Now, we both work in the mental health field. COVID-19, mental health. COVID-19, mental health. So I took it upon myself to contact different mental health institutions, or mental health organizations, if you will. And it took, this is just my own experiment, it took on average for a new patient, it took about a month and a half to 2 month wait for a new patient. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think primarily because word is getting out that it's not such a bad thing to seek out mental health.
Right.
But the problem it's a problem in a good way, I guess, if there is such a thing, in the sense that people are embracing the notion, but the problem is that we don't have enough providers. We don't have enough qualified providers.
Wow.
And so the sources that people go to become overwhelmed. So there is that. And depending on where you live, that also speaks to what the options are. So, for example, in and around the DMV where you are, there is a shortage of minority providers, minority mental health and behavioral health service providers.
Absolutely.
And in many cases, they are oftentimes absorbed into the larger health systems for any number of reasons. So to find a minority private provider is challenging. To find a qualified minority service provider, licensed, skilled, and culturally sensitive and appropriate, is doubly challenging.
Right. Do you feel that it's more leaning toward the interests of individuals in that culture to enter into this profession? Or is it more of it's just in general not enough involvement into the profession? Where do you think that problem lies from your opinion of that shortage?
Pipeline. Simply put, pipeline. Let's be clear. Half of the population is male. The other half of the population is female. I mean, granted, the numbers may be skewed one way or the other, slightly or whatever, but basically, just for the sake of this discussion, let's just say that's true. If over 60% of females embrace mental health and mental health services and the mental health and behavioral health field, social sciences field, then you're going to have over 80% in the population of students that are going into study that work. What did it look like in your classes?
Through my experience, I was one of the rare males, well, African-American males, if you will, in each and every single class, internship, anything that I've done or participated in as far as the profession down to even working. I kind of was, well, not even kind of, I absolutely was the minority as the African-American male in this profession throughout everything that I touched or participated in up to this point of growth in this profession. I was the minority.
Yes. And as I said, I graduated in 97. And my class was rare because I think we had 7 males, 5 of whom were African-American.
Right.
And that was extremely rare. And again, that was 97.
Sure
and I
did.
doubt that they've had more than what we had in my graduating class up until the time that you graduated, that they've had a larger group than what we had coming out in 97.
I'd say 3 in mine. It was 3.
Yeah. Yeah. So that being said, if that's all schools are putting out into the field in terms of the population that look like the two of us, the unicorns, then that other half of the population that I was mentioning is not going to really see a lot of people that look like them in the field when they do decide, okay, all right, you know what, I probably do need to see someone, probably do need to talk to someone. Who's there?
Right. Which
No, you go down the list of various insurance agencies or various insurance providers, whether it be Magellan or whomever, and depending on your insurance, you ask for a minority male or African American in particular male service provider, mental health and behavioral health service provider. You're not going to find a lot of options to select from.
There seems to be a misconception that mental health therapists don't need mental health services themselves.
Oh, that's a huge fallacy. That's a huge fallacy. That's the equivalent of saying that a medical doctor who treats people with colds, flu, you name it, don't need flu shots. That's the equivalent of saying that just because I'm in this field, I can drive a car without car insurance. Now, there may be people that are on the fence against flu shots, and I'm not advocating flu shots for those that are opposed to it. I'm not trying to force that down anyone's throat or anything like that.
Right.
The point I am saying, or the point I am trying to make, is that oftentimes, before we even get into the field, we need to do a deep dive into what it is that is propelling us into this work. Because I can say for myself that I've seen people go into the work that didn't do the work required to do the work. That makes sense. Meaning they didn't do the self-examination to determine the real motivation behind their interest in getting into this field.
Playing the devil's advocate, Mr. Gibbs Jr.
Go ahead.
Why is that so important? Why do they need to assess themselves before going into it?
Because if you have never taken the time to learn how to drive a car, you don't need to be in a showroom selling them.
Wow. Are there any dangers from not doing that? Are there any not dangers, but consequences from not doing that from your perception?
Indeed, because there's this notion of projection. There's this whereby I'm gonna say it this way.
Okay.
I think it was Dr. King that coined this phrase, or at least he used it. The unexamined life is not worth living.
Could you elaborate on that for you?
If you've not looked back and looked at the what, the why, the how can you, if you've not dissected your own life, how dare you? How dare you use your license and your education to pull apart someone else's? If you don't know what it feels like to dissect, inspect yourself and pull yourself back together and understand why it is that you do what you do, how is it reasonable or even fathomable that you would feel entitled to do that to someone else?
I want my listeners to really soak in what Mr. Gibbs Jr. just said. I really, really, really want you to soak in what he just said, because I tend to believe that what he just stated can be listed across the board of many professions, okay? Many professions. It's not just mental health, social work, things of that sort. This can go straight across the board. But what he just said is so significant. So significant. Mr. Gibbs Jr., at this time, I wanted to ask you, there's a portion of our show where we ask our guests to come on and provide some encouragement for free. It's a slogan that is a part of Triumphant Moments. It's called Encouragement for Free. What is some encouragement for free that you can provide for our listeners?
There's a phrase that I coined after a tragedy hit my life, and it's so interesting because it came to me, and I just kept using it. I kept using it, and the phrase was just keep getting up. Just keep getting up. And I laughed one day because I like to listen. I'm a jazz music fiend, fanatic, whatever. And I was listening to Marlena Shaw, her Go Away Little Boy song. And toward the end of the song, after she decides that she's going to take her boyfriend back or whatever. Mm-hmm. She uses that phrase, just keep getting up, just keep getting up. And I thought, oh wow, it's not new. But well, what's old becomes new, because depending on your circumstance, even though the words were not new, they had a new meaning for me. And I would encourage anyone that's dealing with anything that they feel has gotten them down, that they feel has the advantage over them, that I want to encourage you to keep getting up, because as long as you're getting up, you've got an opportunity. Wow. You can take a standing 8 count, but get up off the mat. Wow. You can get knocked down, but get up. Wow. Just if nothing I said today makes any sense, that you don't understand anything else I've said, please hear me and know that you can keep getting up.
Mr. Gibbs Jr., thank you for coming in. We plan to have you in the future one day. I definitely got to get you back on the show. Thank you for even being a supporter of it. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for thinking that I had something to offer. So I appreciate you for reaching out to me.
Absolutely. Sometimes in life you must fail in order to receive and achieve. But one thing's for sure, you must never, ever, ever give up. This is T. Wood, and this is Triumphant Moments.